Let's get started with this session. I was just talking to Warren and Peter, and they said one of the things they've noticed in the group is that the average age of people in this group seems to be getting younger as the years go by. They then looked at each other and chortled with laughter, with an obvious response to that comment. But let me just introduce our Muppets, as I called them, which I've just been, a number of people outside picked me up on, saying you can't call these two distinguished gentlemen Muppets, and I was not calling them Muppets. Well, I guess I was. But we are privileged to have these two guys sitting here to share some of their experiences this morning. Peter Jollie AM is a former CEO of P&O Containers in Australia and has been director of several listed and private companies over the last X number of years. He's currently director of Coleman Gregg Lawyers and Clinical Genomics. He's past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants as a member of CPA. I didn't think they were still in business, Peter, but anyway, let's keep going. And as director of ASX Market Supervision from 2006 to 2010. He's also previously a governor of the Hart Research Institute. He's had a long involvement in international trade throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Has chaired Australia's committees to multilateral trade meetings. He's been a member of the Trade Policy Advisory Committee to Ministers for Trade for 6 years, up to 2002. He facilitated a review of the Export Market Development Grant Scheme for Austrade in 2004-05. He was a member of the Finance Commission and Communications Commission for the Sydney 2000 Olympic bid. And he was made a member of the Order of Australia in the year 2000 for his services to the accounting profession, to the promotion of Australian trade in the Asia-Pacific region, and to the community. Indeed, a distinguished member of Australian society, the business community, and of course the CEO Institute. Warren Hart has over 30 years' experience in leading major organisations through the roles from very senior management roles through to the CEO role. He's a principal of Warren Hart and Associates, which has been advisor of choice to many leading private and public sector corporations, with clients in a range of industries from mining, metals, consumer goods, biotech, local government, financial services, and in the broader federal and state public sectors. He was Managing Director of Australian Water Technologies and Deputy Managing Director of the Sydney Water Corporation, and has got extensive experience in projects across a range of countries through Australia, the Philippines, New Zealand, Thailand, and Fiji. Warren's a former CEO Institute member and is currently an active company director, executive mentor, advisor to CEOs and boards, and a consultant to the public sector. He's frequently sought as a public speaker on the topics of leadership, the role of CEO, and broader government issues, and has an extensive network across those industries. Again, an esteemed member of the Australian community, the business community, and of our organisation, the CEO Institute. Please welcome Peter and Warren.
Tim, before you start, I'm over here this way. Can I disrupt, add a comment? Because you've just read out wonderful things about these two esteemed gentlemen, but I think there's also a lot of personal stories. So these two are lovely people, I think, are responsible for why the CEO Institute has such incredible chairs. They're the reason that that we do our job so well is because they mentor and guide so many chairs coming into the CEO Institute. I was mentored by Peter as I came in and attended a couple of meetings with him. He gave me confidence. He helped shape how I run my syndicate meetings, and he really has been instrumental as I've grown into that role. And I thank him for that. It has been invaluable, his experience. Warren, on the other hand, will always answer emails and a phone call and have a coffee with you and give you his advice and guidance as well. So I think as the chairs here of the CEO Institute, we owe them a huge amount of gratitude and thanks. We recognise their contribution, both to their professional world, but to us as people. And I think as syndicate members, I'd like to say that you should recognise the contribution they make to developing us chairs. So thank you, that's a personal story.
Yeah, well said. My glasses just fogged up with emotion then. That was beautiful. Sensational. So...
You usually have to be dead to have lovely things like
No,
that.
that's right, that's right. But
I
you
can
two are
take
definitely
over
not
if you
that.
like. It's okay.
We're just Muppets.
No, you're not Muppets either. So you've got great sense of humour. But it must be the case that you've seen a lot of things change over the last few years. So, Peter, let's start with you. What are the 2 or 3 things that have changed in the context of being a CEO in the last 15 or 20 years from your perspective?
Well, first of all, I can't resist this. I'm sorry, Tim, but we've had these lovely statements and sort of CVs and things, but we can now add Muppet impersonator at the end of it. And just in case, Ed, if you don't realise the full weight of this, one of my syndicate members pointed out to me that when you call somebody a Muppet, it isn't necessarily a compliment, Peter. So, you've got to realise that you are very ordinary in a whole series of ways. So
it's Peter Jollie, AM, DM, distinguished Muppet. Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know which one of the 2 Muppets I want to be rather than Warren, but we'll get there later.
I'll be the junior one.
That worries me. So what you were asking was what's changed. Well, I almost have to start off by saying so many things have not changed. The biggest issue 20 years ago was people. The biggest issue today is people. One of the biggest issues 20 years ago is communications. Today, one of the biggest issues is communications. Government's always part of what you're looking at, external factors affecting you. I think to be more helpful in answering your question, the way you asked it, what has changed is I think the social media and the speed of an answer being expected for a question that probably takes a bit of a while to think about. And possibly one of the, I listened to Peter Wilkinson speak over the years, and one of the things I've learned from him is that that you don't have to immediately jump in with a quick answer. I was in the James Hardy situation. I was being interviewed by the unions as to how I received monies without doing due diligence to become a director. And some of the things that they were asking were frankly insulting. But what I tried to do was just take out the noise and answer factually. And again, one of the things that is an answer for CEOs to implement is not to get swept away today. 20 years ago, you were expected to take a bit of a while to think about something. Now you're not. And ignore you lot as CEOs. You should be in control. You can say, hey, that's a damn good question. I really need to think about the answer. And if it's I've got to come back to you in a week's time after I've gathered a few more facts, that's often quite reasonable. So,
You touched on in an earlier conversation that the role of CEO has always been a relatively lonely one. Is it more lonely now than it used to be?
I think it's more visible, but I don't think it's more lonely.
Warren, your views?
As you know, as a chairman yourself, or as a chair yourself, part of the remit is to go out and interview prospective members when they come through into your syndicate. And in reflecting on what I was going to say today, I thought about what I used to say 15 years ago and what I say now. And so it's probably worthwhile using the example of what I would say to a new member in late 2003 as opposed to 2018. I mean, I think the first thing is most people join because there is an element of the loneliness of a CEO. It's a very, very lonely role. And especially knowing that the buck stops with you, impacted upon that the speed of technology. Everybody in this room is walking around with a camera. There'd be nobody in this room who wouldn't have a camera here today, I wouldn't have thought. The speed that translates into a problem for your organisation, where someone can capture something on a camera and say, well, this happened in your industry an hour ago. What do you think? What have you got to say? I haven't even been told yet. How can I say anything? So there's the loneliness of a CEO. I think the other thing is that there's no benchmarking of CEOs across disparate industries. So that you might benchmark CEOs in banks, God forbid, on the salary they obtain, they retain. But part of the way the CEO Institute's constructed is to have people from different industries. That's the chemistry, that's the magic of it, of having people across different industries where you can say, well, I've got that problem. I'm in a totally different industry to you. I've got that problem. This is how I solved it. And I think the third thing I'd say is that there is this ability through the CEO Institute, it was mentioned by the previous speaker, to be able to think that what you say in the Institute meetings remains confidential. Sydney's a small place. It's a village. People that know me well get sick and tired of me saying that, making that comment. I nearly worked with Peter in 1993 as a colleague, except for a bit of interesting politics. And then I sat on an advisory board with him in 1998 to 2001. So you've got that ability as members of the CEO Institute to be able to talk frankly about issues, and it might be your chair that you're talking about. It might be, I've got this CFO that it's just not working. He's a great person, or she's a lovely person, but it just doesn't work. And so being able to expand on that and feel that when you walk out of the room, what's said in the room stays in the room is very powerful in reducing that issue of the loneliness of a CEO. I don't say anything different now if I was to go out and meet a new member next week than I would have in 2003.
Let's pick up on that point. So in the workplace, as distinct from in the Institute, the relationship between the CEO now and the chairman of a company, be it a public or a private company, has that changed in your view?
I think it has. I think chairmen or chairs are much more interventionist now and need to be. However, they need to be very careful. I mean, I've been on a number of boards in my third stage of my career, which is what I'm in now. There is a real problem in being too operational. There's no question about that. And that doesn't matter whether it's a board of a listed company or something you mightn't think about, a council with councillors and a general manager. Recruit a really good GM, and the best way to lose them is to try and manage the council for them, because you're going to lose them if you do that. So I think there's always going to be that balance, Tim, but I think there's an expectation that chairs now will know more about the running of the business without hopefully not trying to manage it themselves if they've got a good CEO. Yep. I'd be interested in Peter's view, actually.
Well, I think 20 years ago, people in the position of chair or CEO expected respect. If you expect respect now, you're going to be sorely disappointed. You've got to earn it and keep earning it. So it's to that extent it is harder now. I've seen people that I didn't think would be great CEOs actually change as they had the job, the responsibility, and it gave them the authority that they didn't have in their old role. That would be more difficult now because different generations, different people, social media, the whole thing, people are continually being questioned. So the chairman's role, which used to be sort of 20 years before that, was The main thing he did was choose what the board would eat for lunch. Now it's far, far from that. So the chairman is being blamed for a whole series of things that he or she actually didn't realise was their responsibility. So I think you've really got to recognise today that not only may you be on your own, but there are more people throwing rocks, sort of ripe tomatoes.
Yeah, and they're coming from different
Yeah.
avenues. One of the things that has definitely changed, I imagine, in the last 15 or 20 years is the fact that people inside organisations are probably more open on personal issues now. How do you handle that? How do you handle the personal life coming into the workplace perhaps more now than it used to be, or more openly now than it used to be?
Well, Warren is fantastic at that. You've been counselling, I reckon universities, I can say this, they're not my clients, they tend to be his, but universities tend to be the worst organised, most poorly managed and ill-disciplined structures in Australia, and he sorts them out. So,
Yeah, interesting question. Just run it past me one more time. I just want to think about it.
People's personal lives bring personal issues into the workplace. Yeah.
I'm careful because, that's what I thought you asked. I'm careful because one of the ways we distinguish ourselves between our competitor tech and ourselves is that we don't tend to get overtly into the personal issues. However, we're dealing with a cohort now that are all younger than Peter and I think, everyone in this room fits that criteria, who are more used to sharing those feelings. And I've chaired 3 syndicates over the years, I'm chairing 2 now. I can honestly say in all that 15 years, I've watched a greater inclination for people to, I mean, we talk about buying, I do a lot of recruitment, one-off recruitment, about 1 or 2 jobs a year. Clients will say to me, I want the whole package. I want to know what I'm getting as the whole package. What am I buying if I buy Ruth or George or Jim? And so when you sit in a CEO Institute meeting and chair it, as the 3 of us do, and somebody says, well, actually, I had a nervous breakdown a couple of months ago. I didn't say anything to you, but I did. What are you going to do? You can't sit there and say, well, we're not going to talk about this. Because that's the glue that holds the syndicate together. The previous person that was interviewed said that. Other people that will be interviewed say that. It's the special part of the offering that makes you feel that you can go there and be open. Now, some people are going to be more open than others, but there is no question there is a greater openness now than there was 15 years ago. If you ask me whether I think that's a good thing, I think it is, because it's a bit like share something that nobody would know about me. It's one of those type of things that comes out as part of the offering. And I think the syndicates are a better syndicate as a consequence of that.
I'll follow on from what Warren was saying, that about 6 months ago at one of the syndicate meetings, one of the members had had a near-death experience in his house. A boy who'd been playing swimming, 18-year-old, 17-year-old boy, had nearly drowned, or that's what they thought. It all turned out all right in the end. There's nothing he could have done that he didn't do well, and the boy fully recovered against expectations. But the fact that he shared that with us suddenly made us realise how complacent we are. He hadn't done anything wrong, and yet he was in the middle of this hugely traumatic situation. And that caused 3 other people around the table to say, well, actually, I had a heart attack. Actually, the reason I haven't been here for a few months was they didn't know what was wrong with me. And we don't have soul-searching, how's your divorce going, situations in our meetings generally.
Nor in mine.
But it is good that part of this confidentiality thing and collegiate nature of the groups allows people to open more than they normally would. I had a discussion just a little bit earlier, where I feel women are much better at opening up with their, we had an interview before, opening up with their, how they felt about stuff, how they approached things, what they did. And it's unfortunate. We need more female members in the CEO Institute. So recruiters, and any of you around the table, if you know potential CEO members of the Institute, particularly if they're female, we need that balance in our syndicates, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think just finishing off on one of the things that Peter said, I think that you'll find that although we have more female members now than we had in 2003, in that period of time we've had two female CEOs, one of whom's with us today, Yvonne, who was with the organisation for over 10 years. I think listening to the story of particularly some of the very, very excellent women I've had a chance to work with in the CEO Institute, that in a lot of ways it even has an added impact on women who, I say this not as an advertisement, because people that know me well know I'm speaking from the heart, no pun intended. Most women are better than they think they are, most women executives. Most women put the bar higher than men. And when they get into a syndicate where it works for them and they can feel that they're being validated and accepted for the skills they bring, they realise they are better than what they think they may have been, and then they go for it. And when they go for it, get out of the way.
Great point. I want to open this up to questions from the audience. So the first thing is, have we got anyone who wants to...
Do you want questions about anything that they've
About
talked
anything.
about, or is it the women? I'm happy to give my point on the women bit, as you know I would. So from my perspective, this is why these guys are held in such high esteem. If you listen to them talk about the changes and how they accept and treat women coming into both their syndicates and how they see them, I have total respect for the way these two. I would say we do need more women in the syndicates. As a female chair, having women members of my group has been amazing, and I love to see that balance in there. I will also say that most of the men I've come across here are incredibly welcoming, accepting, and aware of differences, as there should be. There are differences in how we view ourselves and our careers, in how males view themselves and their careers. And those differences are there to be celebrated in a syndicate, not challenged. For me personally, let me tell you, the word equality sticks a bit. I'd rather have parity. It's a much nicer word in our marketplace. So for me, it's about parity, both in the syndicates, in the workplace, and seeing women on boards. My question, obviously, to Peter before about how women are treated in the media is a completely different topic, and we won't go there. Any other questions?
We have one down the back.
Right.
I'd like to ask you guys a question about chairman, picking up on you were talking about the role of chairman and the boards and the relationship of chairman and I'm here I am, Janetta from Syndicate 72. I wanted to ask you what your opinion is of the visibility or lack thereof of Cricket Australia board and chairman during the ball tampering saga.
You're a well-known cricket aficionado.
I'm not John Howard, mate. I mean, occasionally, somebody mentioned Ray Williams earlier. The judge in that case, I had a reason to read it in great detail. I can't remember the judge's name. I tried to Google it, but it didn't let me. He said halfway through the case, "Did nobody ever ask, is this right?" And I thought that was the most insightful question that a judge has asked that I've heard. And the worry with the cricket thing was that nobody asked the guy doing the tampering, the captain who knew it was happening but didn't actually pursue it, the angry opening batsman whose wife was being maligned, did any of them say to themselves, is this right? And the short answer is they didn't. If they had have done, they'd be in a different position now. And that's the lesson I think that everybody needs to take out.
Could I just add something to that? Because anyone who's read my LinkedIn profile will know that I am a bit of a cricket tragic and have been involved in cricket all my life. I played representative cricket in under 19 level for Australia, and even today I'm involved in first grade club in Sydney in a redevelopment. I actually think the biggest single issue there is that there is a big fat middle layer, and I think someone mentioned it earlier, it might have been Carl, that, this crispy layer that's got in between the reality of the world and the board. That whole dispute between Cricket Australia and its players was being handled by the chairman, I suspect, as if he was still in a mining company, where the Labor was actually just there to bring out the real asset, which was the ore. When in fact that's not the case at all. The talent is the asset, and it should have been handled a very different way. So I actually think cricket.
That was before.
I think the whole issue is that cricket has always been a game about ethics, and always been a game about values. And we need someone like Mark Taylor to step back in, an old teammate of mine, but someone who actually genuinely lives and breathes the ethics of the game, to take it by the scruff of the neck and bring it back to where it should be. So I think it was genuinely a leadership issue. I suspect we've now seen James Sutherland go, and I think there's one more to come, and that's the chairman.
Can I answer the question in a slightly different way? Because I don't have the knowledge of cricket that you have, although I suppose the expression "it's just not cricket" means something.
Yes.
I think gone are the days when you could have a good chair and an average CEO, or a good CEO and an average chair. I think those days are gone. I think you need the synergy that comes from two people, male or female, it doesn't matter to me, that are on the same journey and see life in similar terms and have similar values. Because if the chair has a value that is so off the map compared to the CEO, the people in the organisation will pick up on those cues and will look at them and say, what do we do here? Where's the ship going? Or vice versa.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think we've got a question over here.
Tasso from Syndicate 40. A question to all three of you, if I may. Over the last 15 years, we have seen boards, and we all have aspirations to have an advisory board in our businesses or have a board. We're either in a listed board as well. But the roles of the chairman and the CEO and Warren, the alignment, I agree with. That alignment has to be there, and it's the DNA that takes the leadership on. But there is still a lot of issues that occur about operational things that are managed by the chair because of that alignment sometimes crosses over. And what's hands-on and what's hands-off from a board point of view. Operational versus governance and risk management, all those kind of things. Have you seen any of those dynamics change over the recent years?
I don't think they have particularly, unless the chairman and the CEO have a clear understanding of where the line is drawn. You're going to be in trouble. I mean, my line as chairman was, look, I will talk to everybody and anybody and everybody in the organisation, but I will not make an operational decision. And if you are told that I've said they can do something, then they've got it wrong, because I will never do that. But I will listen to everybody in the organisation tell me whatever they believe in, and I may even encourage them to take that further, to go to you or their manager or something with the issue. But it will not be because I necessarily agree or disagree with it, and I will not make a decision, because that's your job.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I think I'm involved and have been involved by accident, as it turned out, in the last 12 years in putting advisory boards into organisations. And I did it as a favour for somebody who rang me up one day and said, what's an advisory board? And could you help me put one in place? I've now put 38 in place across Australia. and I now continue to chair one of them, and I've just been approached about another one. I think the issue with advisory boards is a little different in as much as it is purely advisory, and it really means you've got to be really careful about where you put your feet. Having said that, as an advertisement for advisory boards, if I enhance upon that view of the loneliness of a CEO, if you're a small developing company of 30, 40, 50 people, and you need to get in good talent, you can often get some excellent people as advisory board members that can be extraordinarily helpful to you. And many of them that I've put in have actually come from people from this room, actually.
Great question. Got one question back here, and we've got another one at the back there.
Hi, Sean Cordes, Syndicate 77. It's been alluded to a bit today as a theme in thinking chairman being caught out. It's a highlight of the Banking Royal Commission as well. What are your thoughts on the role of non-executives and advisory board members? I think we've got a real fear now that you can't be a part-timer, that board members actually have to know more and contribute more. What are your thoughts on that?
There was a whole focus after the James Hardy case, actually, on the exposure of directors and how you had to know everything and do everything. I don't subscribe to that. I think you've got to make intelligent inquiries on major issues. But if you don't have your finger on how the business feels, the way it does business, if you do not understand the way your company does business, then as a non-executive director, you are at risk, because you will not know where the risks are in the business. For instance, in a construction company, we had a great focus on safety. And through that focus, I was able to keep, as a non-executive director, my finger on the pulse of how that company was doing what it said it was doing, because we got a lot of statistics coming out of that, and they were third-party statistics. So I don't really see that the role of the non-executive director is so onerous as it's put out to be. I think if you try to do a good job... I mean, look at all these companies where they're absolute bloody crooks. Everything's gone wrong, and not one of them... Poor old Ray Williams we name. There are very few that ever get seriously embarrassed, let alone go to jail. So if you're trying to do your job properly, and that includes documenting some of the stuff that you're doing, I don't see the huge risk in NED roles.
As I've mentioned, have more involvement with advisory boards and non-executive directors on, say, listed companies. Having said that, I think if you are interested in an advisory board position as a step to a full corporate entity, I think it's well worth thinking about the fact that if the person that approaches you knows what they're doing, they will want to convey to you that they would expect you to bring to the table, even though there's no legal liability for you, the same degree of rigour you would bring if you were being paid as a non-executive director. Because otherwise, why haven't?
Yeah.
Why haven't?
Yeah. I mean, I've listed a company in November and actually got a very small statutory board and an advisory board, and I'm in the unusual position where I'm actually executive chairman. So, I'll tell you what, the board meetings are very difficult when I run through the agenda and I get to an operational update and then move chairs and give the report. But my advisory board has a very separate entity, and I think the one thing that those guys were most concerned about was shadow directorship. They were concerned that they were, if we didn't play it properly, that they were actually going to be seen as directors anyway.
Directors, yeah. So
I think advisory boards are very valuable depending on what their purpose is. They've got to have a very clear purpose, and my advisory board is to open doors for me. but they're not involved at board meetings, they don't attend board meetings, they've got a very clear agenda.
I think an advisory board is a good medium if you are going to move into the phase of a proper corporate board.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we've got one final question down the back here.
Hi, my name's Manisha Amin from Syndicate 62, and I'm really interested in that notion of relevance and reputation and having to earn it in a world that's changing so quickly. And your reflections on what, as the people in this room are in that senior management level, we know there are issues in terms of disconnect. How do we make sure that we maintain relevance and earn our keep in a world where sometimes people in our teams are working on areas and theories and technology that is moving really fast?
Well, I think I'll go.
Why don't you go first?
I think every organisation has to, that's wrong, should have a process of acknowledging success, of exposing people and allowing recognition of good and bad. And part of that has got to be, although it's easier to say than do it, a recognition that people that do things are going to do things wrong occasionally. So you don't kill people for one mistake. You find out what they've learned from it and whether they did anything different with that than the 4 things that they got really right. So I don't know if that's answered what you were asking. If I've missed a nuance there, just tell me.
I think it's more in the sense of as board directors or as
Right.
CEOs, in large organisations, sometimes the tech or the way the world is moving, so the digital, explosion, can mean that the nuance of the technology, the ethics of what we're doing, the consequences of what we're doing may not be things that we understand intuitively or straight away. So how do we make sure that that's something we're thinking about, and what are some of the, lessons that you would have or advice you'd have, knowing that you've gone through a whole lot of different eras and changes? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, could I just make a comment on that? Coming from the technology game myself, I think one of the things that has fundamentally changed over the last 15 to 20 years is the technology. Technology for a long time now has been an important part of every organisation. There aren't any organisations that I can think of today, and I'm sure there's an exception you'll point out, but that isn't based on technology. Banks aren't financial institutions, they're technology companies. Hospitals more and more. Yes, they're about healthcare and providing great service, and the people who work in them are brilliant, but the information they've got is monstrous, and more we're seeing new technologies changing things. We're getting trains that don't have people driving them anymore. Technology is just pervasive. I think one of the things that has changed is that technology used to be a department in an organisation. It can no longer be that. One of the things that I've been eminently disappointed about at board levels is there's very few people who actually have a genuine understanding of technology at a board level. They might be retail experts, but frankly, the biggest disruptor is, I was sitting in the office of the CIO of one of the big 4 banks when I was running Oracle, and he said to me, "I'm not worried about Westpac." And he pulled a strategy paper off his desk and showed it to me, and it was their strategy as to how to combat Alibaba. There's disruptors that are coming from everywhere, but it's technology enabled. And the lines between industries are changing. They're blurring, they're changing rather quickly. So I think any organisation that doesn't actually understand the disruption, where it's coming from, and is prepared to disrupt itself while being successful, while it's ahead, is in peril. And all of that is as a result, principally, of technology. Sorry.
Yeah. Good.
I can't add much other than to say, it actually builds on something that came out of one of the presentations this morning. I do a lot of corporate advisory work to boards and chief executives and chairmen. And when I'm talking to people at the executive level, so try and make this on point to your question, I always if I ask 50 questions, if I'm doing a review or a process, I always put in the 50 questions. There's only really about 5 that I really want to know the answer to, because the other 45 I already know. There's 2 that are important. What keeps you awake at night and you wouldn't want the rest of the organisation to know? What's the greatest challenge facing the organisation that you haven't shared with your chief executive?
Great questions. Say those again. Great questions.
What's the greatest single challenge that keeps you awake at night? What's the greatest single challenge that the organisation faces that you haven't shared with your chief executive? And for those of you who may think that people aren't going to answer those questions honestly, I'm bemused in the last tranche of my career at how I look and smile sweetly and look like somebody's grandfather. You really want to know the answer to that? Here! And out it comes.
Amazing. I'm very conscious that we're running out of time, but I also sense this is one of those sessions that could go on for a very, very long time. So let me perhaps close it with one final question to the 2 of you. If you could change one thing in your career, what would it be?
Actually, I think probably I would have more appreciation of how lucky I am at each stage of my career. I don't think one realises the privilege of the position you're in at the time. And I've had a lot of privilege and been very lucky.
Smell the roses as you're going along on the journey. Yeah. Warren?
Gee, I could have given that answer. It's a beautiful answer, isn't it? I guess for me, for those that want to pigeonhole people, I'm considered to be, my style as a CEO, which I was for a number of years, is a servant leader. And for those of you who understand what that means, it's supposed to mean something. I look back and I think, was I really? Because I don't think I was. I probably managed too tightly. I had good people. I had 2 great executive teams in 2 different jobs. And those people went on to do extraordinarily well in business, all of them. I didn't empower them enough. I didn't. Now I think back, I wouldn't have answered this question that way 15 years ago, but now I look back through the interaction with so many smart people that I interact with through my syndicates and in events like this. I look back and I think I talked a good talk about getting out of their way and letting them get on and manage, but I probably held them back a bit, and I regret that because I think they would have done even better than what they did.
One of the great things about leadership to me is when you actually see a great leader, you actually know that they're a great leader. And I think those closing comments identify and highlight exactly why these guys are held in such high esteem, not just by us, but the business community and Australia more generally. So, gentlemen, we're privileged to have you here. We really appreciate your counsel and your guidance. And as members of the syndicate, we'd just like to thank you today. So please join me in thanking Warren and Peter.